Hello and welcome to another edition of Shep's Chat. This is Shep's Chat 601, Chapter 6, concentrating on public opinion and political socialization. Our learning targets for this chapter are listed below. All right, your what if question from the textbook this chapter. Should young people be required to serve in the military? So the textbook goes into some detail about whether 18 to 22-year-olds should have to serve in the military. There are several nations across the globe that require this. The United States historically never has. The book asks, would this create a tighter national bond? Would people feel more patriotic? Would they feel more commitment to their country? We do still have some volunteer opportunities for people to be a part of servicing America. So maybe if we didn't just make everybody be in the Army, you could serve in the Army, you could be a part of the Civilian Conservation Corps, you could join the Peace Corps, you could join Teach for America, so that everybody had their way of servicing the nation. That might be another option besides just mandatory military service. All right, public opinion. What is it? The way you feel about things. How do you express your public opinion? Well, you can vote. That's the biggest one. Make sure you do that. It is your way to share your opinion. If you don't vote, you can't complain. You can write letters to the editor. You can comment on blogs. You can write your own blog. You can call your representatives. You could start a petition. You could join a political party. There are many ways to express your opinion. Make sure you are out there letting people know how you feel. You guys are a very smart, intelligent group of people, and you typically are not afraid to let people know how you feel. So don't change that as you grow older. Make sure you participate in politics. All right. The aggregate of individual attitudes or beliefs shared by some portion of the adult population is the official definition of public opinion. In other words, it's how we think or feel as the general public. There are three ways that we look at public opinion: as a consensus, as a divisive opinion, or as a non-opinion. If you look in the top left corner here, this chart here shows a consensus where we talk about whether it is morally acceptable to use birth control. The vast majority of Americans feel that it is morally acceptable. We have divisive opinions about healthcare, where it's pretty much split right down the middle, 42% to 43%. And then sometimes we have opinions on issues where we really don't have an opinion at all. We don't know enough about the subject or the topic. So, for instance, the Occupy Wall Street movement, which was big when your textbook came out, eons ago, and it talks about the fact that most Americans didn't know enough to have an accurate say about what the Occupy Wall Street movement was all about. So you should know those three different types of public opinions: consensus, divisive, and non-opinion. All right, when policy changes, how does it change in relation to public opinion? Well, 43% of the time, policy changes consistent with public opinion. 22% of the time, it actually changes in the opposite direction of public opinion. And then 33% of the time, it really doesn't change at all. How is public opinion formed? Public opinion is formed through something called socialization. This is the way that we look at politics. We get our socialization through family, friends, coworkers, and what we found recently through science is that a lot of our politicalization, our socialization, comes from genetics. So it's a nature over nurture thing for your political opinion. Not necessarily your political party, but your political opinions are more genetically based than anything else. All right, family and the social environment. Influences in the home have a big impact on your political views. What religion you are, what ethnicity you associate yourself with, your social class, your level of education. These impact your political opinions. It might not necessarily completely correlate with the way you vote. Typically it would, but your religion, if you are an evangelical, you are typically going to be more conservative. If you are African American or Latino, you are typically going to be more liberal. Our parents have a big impact on the way that we go through political socialization, and the way that parents communicate their opinions, especially when we're young children, affects us. We are trying to look for affirmation and receive positive feedback from our parents. So we tend to agree with those opinions. Our parents' views, not necessarily all the time, but more often than not, reflect what become our eventual political opinions. All right, education, the more you know. So the school system is a pretty political system, even from our primary grades. We start teaching young kids in the social studies classes what it means to be patriotic. We talk about pilgrims, flags. We learn about the different holidays, and then we vote on it. We talk about democratic processes. So even though my first grader might not know a lot about government and politics, she can tell you that she voted for Hillary Clinton in the election last year as a like mock election. In the middle school, we start to get more into historical facts and then the structure and functions of government. And by the time you guys get into high school, you have a pretty complex understanding of the political system. Most of you identify with some form of a political party, and some of you guys even participate politically. Our peer and our peer groups can also affect us, but most peer groups within the high school do not. So the fact that you might associate yourself with the nerds or the jocks or the, naughty kids, as I like to call them, that hang out in my room, those people are not going to have as big of an effect on your political opinions, unless your peer groups tend to be politically based. So let's say you belong to a hunting club. You're going to tend to be more conservative. It's kind of like belonging to the NRA. Or let's say you belong to a union. You're typically going to be more liberal. These are stereotypes. It's not engraved in stone that this is how you are going to feel. But the majority of people that belong to the NRA are conservative, and the majority of the people that belong to a union are liberal. All right, opinion leaders. This is another way that we go through the political socialization process. The opinion leaders are those that you have a high regard for. So they mentioned parents, teachers, and they have more of an informal influence for you. And I put like a little sheet picture on this one because opinion leaders can be important, but make sure you're not blindly following anyone. So when we talk in here, we try to not address my political opinion so much, even though you guys always call me a flaming liberal, which only hurts my feelings a little. But I don't want you guys to ever feel like anybody has an influence or a power over your political opinions. That's something that like you get to have. Your parents don't control it. Your boss doesn't control it. You have the opinion over that. So don't let opinion leaders dictate how you think or feel. P.S. Lauren, look at page 185 for a super liberal agenda from your Bigfoot High School textbook. All right, media, any form of mass communication. So like the radio, the newspaper, the TV, the internet, their job in some cases is to inform the public of issues and events. Now the media does what's called agenda setting. And they don't necessarily tell us how to think, but they can tell us what to think about. So the media doesn't tell us how to think, but what the media talks about is what we will think about. If the media doesn't want us to know about something or to concentrate on something, often they won't run those stories. If you look at Fox News tonight, they are not talking as much about the elections. If you look at MSNBC tonight, they are talking more about the elections. Had the election results come in differently, they would be reversed. MSNBC would not be making as big of a deal about the elections, and Fox News would. This is how the media and the channels that we choose don't tell us what we have to think, but they certainly lead us to what we think about. There's also something called managed news, and this is when the government provides information that supports their interests over candor and openness. So a big proponent of this was George Washington because he wanted to make sure that the government looked good. And it's important for the government to look good, but it's also important for the government to be open and honest with us. Prior to the days of Watergate, we weren't as worried about this. We were okay with the government kind of having that shiny, glossy appeal to it. Now we're a lot more cynical of the way that the government shares its information with us. Youth in the media. Where do you get your news from? Well, our generation, you're clumped in there with me this time, get it from the internet. So those basically 35 and younger rely primarily on the internet to get their information. A lot of younger people get their information from shows like The Daily Show, Last Week Tonight, and Alex Jones. Here's the deal though. So conservatives look at Alex Jones like Democrats look at John Oliver. I think that John Oliver is, funny and amusing, and he tells some news stories along the way. Conservatives look at John Oliver like Democrats look at Alex Jones. So Christian probably watches Alex Jones, thinks he's amusing and funny, and then along the way also agrees with his news stories. That's really just the way that we get our news as a younger generation. And over time, our politicians are going to have to adjust to the days of John Oliver and Alex Jones. Also, another liberal agenda alert, really Bigfoot High School, page 187. Look at this and tell me what you guys think is the liberal agenda. All right, political events. How do political events affect our socialization politically? So your life cycle effect. Younger people tend to be more liberal. Older people tend to be more conservative. Life experiences change your perspectives. So does that mean you get more cynical as you get older? Does it mean you have more experience with people? Does it mean you just change the way you think altogether? I used to not like rice. Now rice is one of my favorite foods. Who knows? All right, the generational effect. So you live through something, it changes your outlook on things. Those who lived through the Watergate scandal tend to have a more negative view of government. Those who are my age that remember being told that Iraq had weapons of mass destruction might be more cynical when they hear something from their government and want proof. All right, political preferences and voting behaviors. So in this case, we are only talking about stereotypes. In no way does every single person in any one religion always vote the same way. So education. It used to be the more educated you were, the more conservative you were. Recently, there has been a shift there for this. So those who have a post-educational degree, so people with master's degrees, professionals, doctorate degrees, tend to now be more liberal than those who are less educated. Socioeconomic status. Poor people tend to vote more liberal. This changed quite a bit with Donald Trump. Your textbook quite clearly has not caught up with that fact. But a lot of poor people relate well to Donald Trump and feel connected to him. Those with high incomes oppose government intervention in the economy and definitely tend to be more conservative. All right, religion. So we talked about this. Evangelicalists are going to definitely be more conservative. Baptists are going to be more conservative. Whereas your Protestants and your Lutherans, especially ELCA Lutherans, are going to be more liberal. Gender. Which gender is more liberal? Women. Women tend to vote more liberal. Certainly does not mean that all women are liberal. And a lot of conservative women feel like they are left out or that they are just clumped in with liberal women. And conservative women dislike that greatly. All right, your geographic region. South tends to be more conservative. Big cities tend to be more liberal. And then race. Currently, only 72% of the electorate is white. Minorities are more liberal. As white people become less and less of the electorate, minorities, if they remain more liberal, will have an even bigger impact on our government. All right, votes by groups in presidential elections. Take some time to pause the video, look at this. This is going to be our fun time basically for this entire chapter. We're going to look at a couple other polls too, but we're going to go back to this one over and over again, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it in the Shep step. Gender, the gender gap, just showing that women vote more liberally than men. They tend to vote for the Democratic presidential candidate more often than the Republican presidential candidate. All right, the purple map. Are more people purple, red, or blue? What do you think? When you're looking at this map, remember that that's covering geographic area and not actual people. So if you see the west coast of California being blue, that's going to be more people than that big red center in the middle of the United States. So are more people red, blue, or purple? What do you guys think? That's a question I want you guys to look up on your own. All right, measuring public opinion. In the 1800s, we started off measuring public opinion with face-to-face straw polls. That was like an unofficial poll where I'd stand outside, and if you randomly walked past me, then I asked for your opinion. It really does nothing to reduce bias. Then we started thinking that it wasn't all in the numbers. So the idea of polls in the beginning was all about if I get 6,000 people to respond, that's going to be good. The more people I have respond, the more accurate it's going to be. However, we eventually find out that statistics are really important, and we realize that small numbers could be more accurate than big numbers. So thanks to George Gallup, now we can take 2,000 people, and if we do it the right way, have an excellent representation of the American public. So it's like a science, kinda, a little bit. So randomness. You just pick some numbers from the phone book, and you call those numbers, and that worked for decades. But it doesn't work anymore because, well, you can't call with cell phones, and caller ID makes it so people don't pick up. Sampling error. The difference between results and the true result had the entire population been interviewed. So this is an actual mathematical equation that determines if there's a 4% sampling error, 3% sampling error. Poll questions. Sometimes poll questions can be confusing or there can be no correct answer. Are you in favor of abortion or not? Well, in some instances, maybe I am. In some instances, maybe I'm not. There's no yes or no answer to that. And then there's instances of push polling. And in push polling, they try to influence your answers through the questions. Do you agree with blah, 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 blah? See the samples in your textbook.